Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special night here on WKSN 1340 AM, your home of the Jamestown Jammers. I'm Rick Lopez, the voice of the Jammers, and tonight history will be made, and also tomorrow night we got a special night here as the Jammers welcome back Brooklyn to professional baseball. Well, it's been 44 years since the Dodgers left Brooklyn for Los Angeles, and tomorrow night at Diethrick Park, you'll have a chance to see history in the making at our beautiful ballpark with the first pitch scheduled at around 7:05 after the big opening ceremonies. Now, tomorrow night will also be a historic night here for all of us in Jamestown as we kick off a year-long celebration of the 60th anniversary of Diethrick Park. Our beautiful ballpark on Faulkner Street opened its gates way back in 1941, and Jamestown folks have witnessed 7 championships in that grand old park. And tonight, here on WKSN, we have a special night planned for you. And if you were with us last year, you remember we had the Jamestown Baseball Roundtable. Well, this is going to be the Jamestown Baseball Roundtable Part 2. And once again, our Master of Ceremonies here to take you through the evening as we talk about the majesty and the legacy of baseball here in Jamestown. He is our good friend, Greg Peterson. Greg, how are you tonight, sir?
I'm terrific, Rick, and I couldn't be more excited about the guests that we have with us in the studio, as well as the fact that this is the preamble to an extraordinary season, 60 years of memories at the stadium, which now known as Russell Diethrick Park.
Oh, yeah, and we've got another all-star lineup here tonight, Greg. Who we got in the studio? Who we're going to be talking to?
Well, our stars are Lyle Parkhurst, who is a player extraordinaire who was there day one back in 1941, which was the beginning of what was then known as Municipal Stadium. Mr. Baseball himself, Russ Diethrick.
Never heard of him.
Russ will be joining us, together with the guy who makes sure that we all understand what goes on a day-to-day basis, from the Post-Journal, the sports editor, Jim Riggs. And Jim will be regaling us with anecdotes of some of the various highlights over the past many years that he's covered baseball.
Well, I tell you, Greg, it's going to be a fun night, so take it away.
Well, terrific. Excited about the fact, and Rick mentioned it, that tomorrow night will be the first game of a team representing Brooklyn since the Brooklyn Dodgers left in 1957. And I'll put in a little bit of a plug for the fact that tomorrow night we have an extraordinary guest who will be throwing out the first pitch, and that is number 17 of the Brooklyn Dodgers, Carl Erskine. Carl pitched 12 years for Brooklyn and Los Angeles Dodgers, and he's agreed and graciously agreed to come to Jamestown to celebrate this extraordinary and historic event. And in addition, to stay over Wednesday, there'll be a luncheon at the Lakewood Rod and Gun Club honoring baseball, which the members of the Jamestown Jammers and Brooklyn Cyclone, together with various staffing, managerial folks, folks from the Atlanta Braves, folks from the New York Mets, and Carl Erskine will be there to not only talk to us about the good old days of Jackie Robinson, Roy Campanella, Duke Snyder, but also we'll be talking about some more of the personal side of Carl Erskine. I think it's going to be just one extraordinary event. That's going to be, it's a benefit luncheon for the benefit of the Resource Center. It'll be held at the Lakewood Rod and Gun, 11:30 on Wednesday. But as to today's activities, we're blessed to have Lyle Parkhurst in our presence. Lyle, good evening. Lyle, your career really goes back to seeing the first professional games of Jamestown baseball, and that was at Selron Park in 1939. Do you recall much about Selron Park?
Well, I was riding my bicycle up there.
Right.
And I used to get in on the other side of the driver. Mm-hmm. And when the fella took the money for the seat or for the car, and then he drove out on the field. He used to park cars in the field at that time. I used to ride out there, and when I got out just about where he was going to park, I jumped off and went out in the ballpark. And that's how I got in the ball games. I didn't have any money to go anywhere. I left my bicycle outside.
So you don't have any old ticket stubs you could share for the Sports Hall of Fame?
No, I wish I did. That'd be worth something today.
We're looking for those, by the way. If anybody out there in the audience has some Selron baseball tickets. We'd love to be able to see them. Then that was the 1939. Just for history's sake, after the end of 1939, the team left and went to London, Ontario. We lost baseball. And midway through 1940, a gentleman by the name of Harry Bisgeier, who owned the Niagara Falls team, was enticed to come to Jamestown with the promise that there would be a brand new stadium in 1941. Do you remember Allen Park at all, Lyle?
Yes, I do. I played up there.
What was it like?
Well, it was a ballpark.
Right.
And they had a scoreboard in right center field, and you could hit it 9 miles out in left field and never hit anything. and it was very short around the back. That's what I remember of it.
Well, 1940 was the only year of which professional baseball was played there, and that happened to include a guy named Sal Magley on the team for Jamestown that year. And then in 1941, Harry Bisgeier's team started baseball at the then known as Municipal Stadium. And you were part and parcel of that first year, even though we don't see your name on the roster. How did that come to be?
Well, I went down and threw batting practice for him.
Mm-hmm.
I rode my bicycle down. I ride my bicycle goes places. You know, I get there in a hurry. With there was no gas rationing then, and so I rode my bicycle down and asked Mr. Malevy if I could throw batting practice. Well, he liked it because I was left-handed, and he enjoyed that, and I threw batting practice for him, and I got to go on the road with him, and I liked the trip to Bradford because it shook you up and got you in shape before you got there, and different places like that. And but I had a good time. He enjoyed it evidently because they signed me to a 1942 baseball contract for a great figure of $58 a month.
$58.
And all I could eat.
Now, how old were you at that time?
16.
You were 16 years old.
I think I was. Let me see just a minute. Yes, I was.
16 years old, a professional contract with the Jamestown Falcons. That's quite extraordinary, Lyle.
I enjoyed it.
Were you a
The
celebrity?
people did too. I'm thankful for that.
Were you a celebrity because of the fact?
No. I never celebrated. Keep in the background and do what I had to do. And if the boss says go, you go out and pitch. You go out and pitch, and that was it.
Now, 1941 and 42, there were some interesting personalities that donned Jamestown Falcon uniforms. Among those was a guy named Johnny Newman. What's your recollections of Johnny Newman?
Newman was something else. He was a good ball player, a good hustler, and a character on the field as well as off the field. I remember one night he hit I don't know who they were playing, it doesn't make no difference. He hit a ball that the shortstop jumped for and just tipped the cup of his glove and went right up out of the ballpark for a home run. That's how John used to hit him. He brought the the outfield fence right in when he hit.
Yeah.
Did a good job. And then again, he was, I don't like to push on John because he probably has something to say about me too, but he always wanted to play left field.
Mm-hmm.
And so the manager, I can't think of what his name was then, but anyhow, he enticed him to play left field.
Mm-hmm.
So John, he was out in left field, done a good job out there. And down there, once in a while, it gets a little foggy, and one of the opposing players hit a fly ball to left field, and John, he got underneath it, and at that time of the year, there were different animals that used
bats. Weren't the bats out there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Come down out from the field, you know. And one of them followed the ball down, and the ball went one way, and John, he followed the bird down. And when he got back in the dugout, that was the last John played left field.
And I bet you razzed him a little bit, did you?
Oh, we got on him good shape because you don't do that very often with John, but when you do, you have fun.
That particular year, your first year of professional baseball, you were 13-8. And then there was also an opposing manager, a guy from Olean named Jake Pitler.
Good old Jake.
Now, you have any recollections of Jake?
I used to like Jake. He liked me for some reason or other. I don't know why, but when we used to go to Olean, it was a different story. When it come to Jamestown, it was a real story. And people just paid good money to see old John perform.
No,
he did.
He did?
Oh, yes.
What did he do?
Huh?
What did he do? Did he bait the umpire?
Well, he did things that you can't do today. Today you can't go down and talk with the umpire about balls and strikes. Well, every time there was something close, with John at third base coaching, he'd dive down there finding out about it. Took his hat off, threw it on the ground, stepped on it, and run around, ramped around, and this and that. And he had a good time. I enjoyed it. And then he'd go back to the base coaching again. But he had a good time.
Now, after 1942, with your good year of 13-8, you went up to AAA baseball.
Yes, I did.
And where was that?
Buffalo Bison.
Now, tell us a little bit about that year.
Well, that was the farm club of Detroit. Evidently, they were short of ball players, so they signed me to a contract. And I played up there. I won 1 and lost 3. I played relief.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoyed it very much. I learned an awful lot off the field up there from the guys that were sent down from Detroit. They were either hurt or their arms were sore or they had problems. And they used to sit in the dugout and talk about the different things that went on during the ball games, how they did this and that and this and that, and I'd listen and I'd take all that stuff in and I learned an awful lot from the fellows that were not playing.
So you mingled that year with an awful lot of professional baseball, Major League Baseball players.
Oh, yes.
Then after that year, you came back down to Jamestown and probably had your best year ever in 1944 with the Falcons.
Yes.
And you played with a guy named Nellie Fox.
Oh, Nelson?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Tell us about him. At the time, did you think this guy would ultimately end up in Cooperstown?
I did. Yes, I did. There was a lot of guys that didn't think so because, well, that's another thing. But Nellie, he played every position on that infield if you wanted him to. Played center field. I know I nailed him up against the wall a few times with bad pitches. But when he got in the dugout, he'd take a look at me and I'd look at him. I'm sorry, Nellie, I said, but I tried to do it, but I couldn't make it. But we're doing all right.
Now, that year you were a 20-game winner. And as I recall, you got even your name in the Sporting News that year.
Oh, they must have been hard up for material.
Yeah. Nevertheless, you won 20 games.
They were hard up for material over Erie. I'll tell you that when they lost. You see, over to Erie.
Tell us about how did that happen? You won the last 2 games of the season, right?
Yes.
Okay, explain that.
One at Erie, and then the other one at Jamestown. Well, Erie was trying to get into the playoffs. We were already in.
Mm-hmm.
They had to win one of those 2 ball games. And I don't know, the manager, he put me out there to pitch, and so I did what I was supposed to do. I won the ball game. And the next day, I didn't throw too many pitches that day. They hit the first pitch, and we got by in pretty good shape. So the next day, I asked the manager, I said, hey, if you haven't got anybody who don't want to pitch, I said, I'll throw. I said, after all, they didn't do much yesterday. He said, well, sure. He had to go to the boss and find out from Mr. Bisgar if it was all right or not, and he got the okay, and we won the ball game. And the people from Erie didn't like it very well because they were trying to get in the playoffs, and we won the ball game, and the other one we won also, and they just didn't like it. That for some reason or other they wanted to win. They didn't win.
So they weren't very happy with you.
No, they weren't.
We're going to take a little break right now, Lyle, and throw it back to Rick, and maybe give us an update as to all the activities that are occurring down at Russell Diethrick Park, and maybe after that we'll come back to Russell Diethrick.
Yeah, okay, Greg. We got Lefty here. We got Russ is here as well. Jim Riggs from the Post. I guess the Post is celebrating an anniversary too, right?
Yep, 175.
175 years. Anniversaries everywhere here. We hope.
By the way, Rick, can I interrupt for just a second? I realize for tonight, this is live.
Yeah.
Speaking of anniversaries, and since I'm probably in a lot of trouble, tonight is Cindy and Greg Peterson's 24th anniversary.
24?
So Cindy, if you're out there wondering what's going on, I'm talking baseball.
24?
Hey, come on out and check us out
My
tomorrow
wife and I
night.
had the 29th here last Friday.
Beautiful.
Anniversaries everywhere. What was that, 29th?
29th last Friday.
Congratulations, Lyle. Don't go away. We're going to come right back to you here. We're going to take a quick break here. Don't forget, coming up tomorrow night, it's opening night of the 2001 season for your Jamestown Jammers. We begin with a 4-game set taking on the Brooklyn Cyclones Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. All games starting at 7:05. For ticket information, give our office a call at 664-0915. We'll take a quick break, and the Baseball Roundtable will be right back here on the home of the Jammers, WKSN 1340 AM. Hey everybody, it's Rick Lopez, the voice of the Jamestown Jammers, inviting you to join Jammers General Manager Dave Wellenzone for Budweiser Presents Baseball Today, every Saturday morning at 11 a.m., right here on WKSN 1340 a.m. Join Dave and his guests for all the latest news on your Jammers, the New York Penn League, and Major League Baseball. It's Budweiser Presents Baseball Today with Jammers General Manager Dave Wellenzone, every Saturday morning at 11 a.m., right here on the home of the Jammers, WKSN 1340 a.m.
It's home run time from your hometown team, the Jamestown Jammers, minor league baseball at its finest. The most affordable family fun around. Don't miss your hometown team in their opening homestand versus the Brooklyn Cyclones, the first pro team in Brooklyn since the Dodgers left in '57. It's the Cyclones' first game ever, so we'll go easy on them. Not. Then the Hudson Valley Renegades come to town for 3 games. Tickets are $3, $4, and $5, and are available at Diethrick Park daily from 9 to 5 and before the game. The Jamestown Jammers, the most affordable family fun around.
Welcome back to the Jamestown Baseball Roundtable here on the home of the Jammers, WKSN 1340 AM. Rick Lopez here, the voice of the Jammers, and I'm glad to certainly be back in Jamestown. And it all begins tomorrow night at 7:05 at Diethrick Park. 60 years of baseball at Diethrick Park as we begin a whole summer-long celebration of our great ballpark. Hope you can come out and see us. Not only that, Greg Peterson, also the Brooklyn Cyclones are in town. Brand new baseball team, first professional baseball team in Brooklyn since the Dodgers moved away way back in 1957. You like more information on this upcoming homestand that begins tomorrow night, 4 games with Brooklyn, each game starting at 7:05. Give our office a call. The number is 664-0915. And now, Greg, back to you. You got Lyle Lefty Parkhurst here, Mr. Baseball, Russ Diethrick, Jimmy Riggs coming up in just a bit.
Terrific. And before we conclude with Lyle, there are a couple of matters I just have to get out, because you had an opportunity, which very few people could say they had, not only to meet some of the greats of baseball and play with some of the greats of baseball, you also pitched against one of the greats in baseball, Stan Musial. Tell us what happened.
Well, I was in spring training 1947 with the Dodgers, and we went over to one of the places by the ocean there to have an exhibition game. And I was in the bullpen. And they got in a little bit of trouble, and lo and behold, the manager didn't know me, but he got me in the ball game. And I got to going pretty good. I had a couple of innings. I got the fellows out, and Musial came to bat, and I looked and I thought, well, I know that fella. He's a pretty good hitter, and so I got ahead of him. I had him 2-2, and I thought I'd throw him a curveball. I did, and down at the park that we played in, there was a fence in right field. It was 427. I'll never forget it. And that was too high. And behind that, there was 2 rows of where semis went one way and one went the other. And on top of that, beyond that, there was a pulley works, nice big pulley works, and on top of that there was a, they had a roof. That ball that he hit off of me landed on top of that roof. And it didn't take very long to get out there either. And I watched him. About the time he got to second base is when I saw him, and I watched him, followed him around, And one of the major league umpires said to me, he says, "That's all right, young man." He says, "He does it with the best of them." And I kept watching in the paper, and he did it with the best of them.
Oh, man.
I enjoyed that. That was worth the time at bat.
Oh, what a great experience. What a great story. You were in the Dodgers organization in Nashville, North Carolina, and then went to Pueblo, Colorado.
Yes, sir.
And then ended up in Olean, New York.
Yes, sir. Right next to home.
And that was your last year in professional baseball. And they worked out sort of a unique relationship with you, didn't they?
Pardon?
They permitted you to work here and then play, right?
Yes, they did. I worked, when I wasn't there, I was home working in one of the factories. And I'd go down there for the ball game, and then I'd come back home again. And I didn't last very long doing that because, well, it just wasn't fair to the ball players. They had to work out, and I didn't work out, and that wasn't good. So I just asked them if I could have my contract. I can't think of the fellow that was a business manager, but the business manager that was there was a fellow that was the sports writer over at Dunkirk. Now his son is at Dunkirk. Now I don't know just exactly what. Bill Hammond. That's right. His name was Bill Hammond, and he's the one that I've got my contract at home where I signed it, and he signed underneath it. So.
Well, that wasn't your end. It may have been end of your playing career, but I'm looking at your stats here, Lyle, and I can say from firsthand experience, you've called me out on several occasions. Not only did you umpire for baseball, but softball as well for over 52 years, and that's utterly extraordinary.
Were you out?
Of course not. But that's unbelievable. So I can't thank you enough, Lyle, for all you've meant to Jamestown professional baseball, but you kept it on. Not only did you stay here, you became an active part of this community, and you're to be commended for everything you've meant to baseball and to softball here, and as an educator and as an umpire. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. It was my pleasure.
Well, it was our pleasure. And we're now going to turn the mic over to Russ Diethrick. And Russ accolades, we could be here for the next 5 hours, and recently was the recipient of the John Hamilton Award for Outstanding Community Service. And by the way, congratulations, Russ, on that award.
Greg. Thank you.
Since we sort of have a Dodger theme here, not only Carl Erskine, but the Brooklyn Cyclones coming in, and you ended, Lyle, with the Dodgers organization. In our long and proud history of professional baseball over the 60 years, even Jamestown had a relationship with the Dodgers, and that occurred in 1966. And Russ, you were right in the middle of all that. How did that occur?
Well, in 1965, we were with the Tigers, and we severed the working agreement with the Tigers after the end of the 65 season. We struggled through that season, and the change was made. We dropped the working agreement with Detroit, and we were looking for somebody and to come to Jamestown with a franchise, and Vince McNamara was president of the league, had been contacted by Fresco Thompson, who was the vice president player development with the Dodgers. And they were looking to get into the NYP League. And Vince says, well, as it just happens to be, Jamestown's available, so they brought their team to Jamestown. I was only here 1 year in 66, but that was Jamestown's touch of the Dodgers.
As I understand it, there was an extraordinary batting race that year, which we had a player that would not only went right down to the last game.
That's right. Dave McMahon and, of course, Cito Gaston from Batavia was who they were racing with. And, of course, he went on with Toronto and had a great career after that. The last day, I think there was about 3 points difference in the batting average. And the batting championship ended up with Dave in Jamestown.
Now, after that particular year, 1966, the franchise, it was really destined for just 1 year here, wasn't it?
That's right. I think that's all the Dodgers had in mind, was just coming to Jamestown intern just for a very short spell, and it ended up being 1 year. I know when Fresco left, he said, no, Jamestown has everything. They have a tremendous ball field. They have a great community. They have a lot of baseball interest. But the one thing that they're lacking is they have a lot of fans in Jamestown, but the fans just don't come to the ball game. And so that kind of brought that to the end of that 1 year.
Well, interestingly enough, the team that followed the Dodgers was a team from...
The Atlanta Braves. Yeah, we were very, very lucky to bring Atlanta in here, and that was a good relationship, and Harry Doherty was a manager during that period. And talk about a personality. Well, I'm sitting next to a personality called Parkers, and Harry Doherty was a personality himself.
Greg, could I cut in for just 1 second?
Yeah.
Russ, the reason that they left, was it because they really liked being here in Jamestown, but they wanted all their farm systems at the time close to...
Being the Braves, you mean?
Yes.
Yes,
right.
that was their reason for leaving. We talked and negotiated that at the time. They wanted to bring everything closer, and that was a trend for a lot of the teams to do that. And the Braves had the opportunity to do that. And, of course, during that relationship, Jim Fanning was involved in Atlanta. And after that, Jim went on to work with the Central Scouting Bureau for a short time. And then he went to, of course, the vice president at the operation in Montreal. So then there was a period of Jamestown was looking for a franchise. And Jim Fanning was aware of Jamestown, knew about Jamestown when the Braves were here. And they came in as the Expos were here for a long time. But the time that we were with the Dodgers were exciting. A young college administrator, Bill Barrier by name, a college in Pennsylvania. Can't bring the name back to us right now, but I think Bill was about 26 years old. He was exciting. He was from the college campus, and he had a lot of young ball players, and they lived the life of the college campus. When Bill put a curfew on, and when he called curfew time, he meant that. Everybody's watch had to synchronize with his. And even played it to the minute, so there was a lot of discipline on that team. No real great outstanding stars other than Dave, who was racing for the batting championship. So it was an exciting time. One of the great things we were able to get close to was Fresco Thompson, one of the great administrators of baseball. And he was in and out of Jamestown a couple times, so we had an opportunity to be with him. Of course, as that season ended, with the lack of fans, we had a little bit of debt when the season was over, but we were kind of used to that during those days. But it kept baseball here, and it was exciting.
Well, you kept baseball here. There were a few administrators, and you being the foremost among them, that the debt would appear annually, and Russ Diethrick and a few others who were part of that administration would dig deep into their pockets, make sure that the creditors got paid at year end so that there would be another year. And,
well, we all thought that was part of the final standings. You had to work in red ink. But a lot of teams were doing that. It wasn't just unique to Jamestown, but...
Well, you're humble to say that, but for all of those activities by a few, we would not be sharing baseball here today. And it's interesting that during that period of time, which most people, frankly, have forgotten, that Dodgers, early Braves, then that was subsequently we had the Red Sox here.
That's right. Yeah, Red Sox with Jackie Jensen was managed here one time. Everybody that follows baseball knows the history of Jackie Jensen. I know he must have drove in here because he wouldn't fly in an airplane, as you remember. But what a great man he was, a good baseball person. He was a major leaguer. Working in the minor leagues was something that was foreign to him. But he worked well here, had an exciting time with the Red Sox. And, of course, the Red Sox then left Jamestown and went to Williamsport when some of the franchises were moving around. But we had good times. Jackie Moore was a long-time manager here. Eddie Sadowski, a former catcher in the major leagues, was here for a season. Of course, we got to work with Neil Mahoney, who was the farm director. What a personality he was, one of the great administrators of baseball, the development of players. Ed Kenny, who was the director of the farm system, was here with the Red Sox. And, of course, his son went on to be working in the higher echelons of the Red Sox just a couple of years ago. So
and he also had a coach for a couple of years named Dick Berardino.
Dick Berardino. Yeah, Dick Berardino was almost like an adopted son. I think he voted here a couple times. But Dick and his family made Jamestown their home, and Dick even come back in the off-season a few times. And, of course, he went to Utica, I believe it was, and with the Red Sox. And
And his daughter married somebody who played in Jamestown who was an awful big Major League Baseball player.
Yeah, one that we would hope would go from Jamestown like Nellie Fox to the Hall of Fame. It may happen someday, and of course that's Dwight Evans. So there's a lot of those ties, Greg, that you've uncovered in a lot of your research over the past several years.
And we've been told if we offer him a wonderful golf game that he may come back.
He may come back, yes.
There were other players during that Red Sox era which went on to have great acclaim in baseball.
Of course, Cecil Cooper and went on to the major leagues, and Ben Ogilvie went on to the major leagues. Both of them arrived here after the season had started in Jamestown. And of course, who would have thought they? And I guess they must have been connected at the hip because they were here together. They were the Red Sox together. They made another couple steps in the major leagues together, and two exciting young ball players.
Why don't you tell the baseball bat story?
Well, what happened there is in those days the local operator was responsible for equipment, the balls and the bats and all of the other things that were necessary. So we, as the local operators, we used to have to get their bats for them. So we would order from Louisville, but whatever model bat they were assigned to, whatever they were using. So they come late in the season. We called down and we got 24 bats for Ogilvie and for Cooper. And as at the end of the season happened to be that we finished on the road. So I was doing some of the cleanup and the duty in and around the clubhouse at the end of the season. And knowing that the following season, when they would come into town to train for the opening of the next season, we'd have to provide balls and bats for the training season. So I went through the locker room and gathered up the bats and put them away and thinking of the next season. And I saw in Ogilvie and Cooper's locker there was a box of bats because we had just bought them for them. They took a couple on the road. So I took all the bats that they had and left two behind to put the rest in where we get them for the next season. When they come back after the road trip, they come in the office the next day, and they were all upset because somebody had been in the locker room. And I said, well, what happened in the locker room? He said, well, somebody stole our bats. And I said, bats? He said, yeah, we had some bats in the locker room, and they've disappeared. There's only a couple left. I said, well, the one that stole the bats was myself. I said, I left you a couple for souvenirs if you'd like them, and the rest we're going to use next spring. So after some discussion, I give them an extra bat for just as a trophy for their time of being here and the excitement of having a souvenir bat. Had I known then that they were both going to go to the major leagues, I'd have given them those bats and any other bats they wanted. But
probably would have got a couple of autographs also.
Probably. And what I didn't do, we used those bats the next spring. They got broke, they got thrown away, and here I had Cooper and Ogilvie bats in my hand and do not have them today.
It was an interesting time in the New York Penn League, and you were obviously intimate part of the management and also intimate part of the league affairs. During that period of time, there was something brand new that was implemented in the New York Penn League, which has subsequently taken hold in the American League and caused much discussion. Give us the genesis of that particular rule change.
Okay, I think you're talking about the designated hitter rule. And the Pony League or the NYP League was a league chosen by professional baseball to be the test of the designated hitter program. And a lot of us, many of the purists in the league were opposed to that. It's just that was to us was like playground softball rules that they were trying to put into professional baseball. So some of us when we had our league meetings, we discussed it in quite depth. So when it come time to vote, President McNamara, explained it to us and told us what it was all about, and come time to vote, and he says, by the way, you can go ahead and vote, he says, but no, irregardless of what the vote's going to be, we're going to have the designated rule next year. So some of the purists had a chance to vent how they felt about it, but it was a test case in our league here, and that's where it started.
What do you think about it?
I'm still a purist.
There you go.
I'm still a purist. I'm not a fan of the designated hitter program.
We're going to have a chance here in just a second to catch up with Jim Riggs, who's going to get his opinion on designated hitter, among other things, which we're going to talk about, including talking a little bit about Pat Doherty and others. And as I'm going to turn it back to Rick in just a second, but for those who have the book Across the Seams, which is the history of professional baseball in Jamestown, it was authored by Dave Muley, and a couple of years ago was widely circulated and, in fact, a complete sellout. On the front page is a picture. On the mound is Lyle Parkhurst, and in center field, boring number 11, is Nellie Fox. So we've got a lot of history right here and a great connection. And for those who want to beg, borrow, and steal and probably go on the internet, get the book Across the Seams and have Lyle sign it. It'll be worth millions. So, Rick, turn it back to you.
All right. Greg, I know you're getting ready to bring Jimmy Riggs on here, but real quickly, Russ certainly one of the real good guys in sports. And Russ, me being back here, it's always a pleasure, and it was great seeing you the other day. You know, with the celebration of the ballpark 60 years, it bears your name. Could you just give me your feeling on having the ballpark named after you and what that meant to you?
It's a very humbling experience, and it's just like I said the night when it happened, I was just overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed that moment, and every time I go by the ballpark and even let it cross my mind, I'm just overwhelmed by by it happening in our community like that. And there's things you just can't put words to, and that's one of the things you can't do. And to have my name tied with something which is so important to the community, which is something that's been so important in my life, is still an overwhelming, a very humbling experience. And when I look at that, I see the name on the stadium, but that name spells an awful lot of other names, like Parkhurst and like Fox and like Eric Guggen and like Dr. Eugene Foley and like Frank Hyde and like Jim Riggs and like Greg Peterson and like Cliff Farnham and just a whole host of people who have been involved as operators. That certainly could spell Marty Haynes. Marty Haynes was a longtime general manager. And talk about Mark Hammond spending his time, Jack Gallagher. There's just, we could go on for hours with the Wybernacks and the Hearst and the Tommy Hearst, who played down here, lived in our community, the Dave Warner. I could go on. It's bad to start names. And when I see that, that's what that spells in my mind.
Well, it's an honor well deserved. Thanks for coming out again, Russ. And you're going to be there tomorrow night, right?
Yes.
And you're giving me a ticket.
I'm giving you tickets.
Opening night.
Anybody.
I think I got a pass.
Anybody in the community that wants an opening day ticket to come down and watch the Jammers and the Brooklyn Slycones, they can stop at any one of the Jamestown Savings Bank outlets, and we have free tickets, free general admission tickets for opening night. So there's no reason, if a ticket is the reason, there's no reason you can't go at the ball game tomorrow night.
There you go. Go see Russ down at Jamestown Savings Bank. Yeah. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Jimmy Riggs is up next. Greg will be talking with him. Don't forget, tomorrow night is opening night at Diethrick Park. Brooklyn Cyclones. History will be made tomorrow. Hopefully you can come out and join us at the ballpark. Give our office a call if you need more information, 664-0915. We'll take a break. Be back with more of the Jamestown Baseball Roundtable right after this here on the home of the Jammers, WKSN.
It's home run time from your hometown team, the Jamestown Jammers, minor league baseball at its finest. The most affordable family fun around. Don't miss your hometown team in their opening homestand versus the Brooklyn Cyclones, the first pro team in Brooklyn since the Dodgers left in '57. It's the Cyclones' first game ever, so we'll go easy on them. Not. Then the Hudson Valley Renegades come to town for 3 games. Tickets are $3, $4, and $5 and are available at Diethrick Park daily from 9 to 5 and before the game. The Jamestown Jammers.
Hey everybody, it's Rick Lopez, the voice of the Jamestown Jammers, inviting you to join Jammers General Manager Dave Wellenzone for Budweiser Presents Baseball Today, every Saturday morning at 11 a.m., right here on WKSN 1340 a.m. Join Dave and his guests for all the latest news on your Jammers, the New York Penn League, and Major League Baseball. It's Budweiser Presents Baseball Today with Jammers General Manager Dave Wellenzone, every Saturday morning at 11 a.m., right here on the home of the Jammers, WKSN 1340 a.m. And welcome back to the Jamestown Baseball Roundtable, a group of Jamestown All-Stars themselves here on the home of the Jammers, WKSN. Don't forget, tomorrow night, a very special night at the ballpark. First Brooklyn baseball team in 44 years will make their debut, taking on the Jammers, 7:05 start. Also, we begin a year-long celebration of the 60th anniversary of our beautiful ballpark, Diethrick Park, and bring Greg Peterson back in. And Greg, I tell you, the city has been working hard once again. We got new bathrooms now at the ballpark on both sides. I mean, the place is looking absolutely beautiful. It don't look 60 years old out there. That is a beautiful ballpark we have.
Oh, it's spectacular, and in fact, some of folks from the Sports Illustrated, I don't know if they'll ever do anything with it, came in and looked at the park last year, and were just amazed at not only the quality, the condition, and maybe sometime they'll come back and actually do a spread on the Russell Diethrick Park.
Right. In this day, Greg, when you're looking around, especially in our league, the New York Penn League, we got teams in New York City. We got 4 in that general area. The Lowell, Massachusetts team might as well be in Boston. It's only 15 minutes away from Boston. You got Youngstown, Ohio, and you're seeing these big multi-million-dollar stadiums, but our field is just as nice as any of those.
Absolutely. Well, it's the Wrigley Field of minor league baseball.
It's gorgeous.
And everybody's very excited about that. In fact, the mayor told me today that he celebrated the first flush. So he was very pleased about that. Everything went well. And we had the first pitch tomorrow night, the first flush last night. No telling what'll happen. It's one of the nice things, Rick, in the history of professional baseball, as we look back over 60 years, that the sports writers have really made a tremendous impact, not only in cataloging that which occurred, but also forming the excitement around which the ballpark, what would happen at the ballpark. I look back just at the man who was responsible for the initial $500 to get a franchise in the New York Penn League in 1939 was the sports editor of the Jamestown, what is now the Jamestown Post-Journal, Stuart McGuire. And that's, as he started it. And Stuart McGuire was intimately involved for the first many years. And then came along Frank Hyde, who I know, Jim, was your predecessor, who for years and years and years really put the flesh on the skeleton as far as professional baseball, really personalizing those statistics that you'd see in a box score. And that's something which the researchers, and we were part of that in doing the book Across the Seams, really appreciated. And we further appreciated the fact that our next guest, Jim Riggs, took that mantle that Frank Hyde had handed to him around 1975 and has run with that up until today. And Jim, welcome to this special edition.
Thank you.
And Jim has seen an awful lot of things over the last many years, and I'm going to try to jog his memory in some of those anecdotes which may be a little more hilarious, or maybe a little more behind the scenes, or maybe something here, now that the statute of limitations has run, you can now for the first time disclose that you wouldn't put in the paper then. For example, Pat Doherty. Pat Doherty was perhaps one.
Provide me with the photos. He'd provide the fans with some fun, and that was Pat, a showman.
Do you want the full copies of the photos?
Oh, yeah, he wanted them the next day. I remember the famous one was the one year I got a series of photos, and it's the classic pose. He's chest to chest with the ump, and that he got tossed. And that I've got a shot of him, he's getting tossed, and he threw his hat and all this stuff. Well, Pat told me the following day the reason why the ump tossed him was that his hat bill bumped into the ump's hat bill, and that was the contact, and he got tossed. So it was the next time that same ump was here, he got in an argument again with him. So Pat's out there, and they're beginning to get closer and closer, so that Pat had recalled the problem with the bill of his cap. So that Pat, he took his cap and he turned it around so the bill wouldn't bump into the umpire. He got tossed again. Now he's really mad. How come you tossed me? Because you turned around the bill of your cap and you're making the game look silly. So that Pat, he said, I can't win either way. So,
do you ever bring out a box to stand on a box?
No, I wouldn't put it past him, but I don't recall him doing that. I do recall a manager here one year, and gee whiz, he was a famous one too. He got so mad, he went out to second base, and he took second base, and he went out to the outfield, and he threw it over the fence. But I can't remember who that was.
That's too funny. We have Lyle Parkers, who's sitting here next to you, and I know Lyle never called one wrong, ever. But I know that you were telling a story off mic about a particular shot that was called way wrong.
Yeah, let me talk about Lyle, though, sitting down in the ballpark. He's the guy who used to sit in the stands and go, "What's the matter, umpy? You called that one wrong, umpy," because these umps love to go out and that they crit. Yes, sir, you sure did. But that I recall a game, Pat Watt was the manager. There was a long drive to left field by the opposing batter. And that the umpire gets right on the line to figure out whether this ball is fair or foul. And the ball curved around the pole. The problem was it didn't curve around the foul pole. About 10 feet to the left of the foul pole in left field was this nice phone pole. And that the umpire, he got it confused with the foul pole. And I mean, we can see it clearly from the box. Todd Peterson and I are about ready to jump out of the box. Bob Payne's yelling. And, well, the Doherty, you can imagine what he was doing. And that this umpire would not change the call, which I think he eventually knew. He took a look and saw one is a yellow pole and the other one's just a plain old telephone pole, but that he wouldn't change it, and it stood.
Now, even you've been put into situations where difficult calls were made. I remember once you were subject of an interview at the hot stove luncheon of how making sure that you didn't have no hit games, and you're always concerned about making calls. Prophetically, after you had managed to do that hot stove luncheon, there was a game shortly thereafter at the ballpark of which there was a disputed call. Tell us about that.
Which I said at that luncheon, one of the fears is that you get a little hit like in the first or the second inning, and then you look at your score sheet, and it's now about the fifth or the sixth, and you see that hit is the only hit, which could have been a hit or an error, and then you get to the seventh inning, and you're sitting up there praying, please hit a line drive somewhere. Well, that a couple of years ago, this happened against the Blue Jays, or the Stompers, they were called then, the St. Catharines Stompers. We've got a slow roller to third in like the first inning. Clearly it's a hit. I rule it a hit. I have no problem. Then it gets to be about the fifth inning, and I'm looking at my score sheet, and I turned to Bob Payne and to Todd Peterson, and I said, that's the only hit. And I said, would somebody please get a line drive? Well, it gets to be about the eighth inning, and I notice the manager and the pitching coach from the opposing team is looking up towards me, wondering whether they can talk after the game, and I'm saying, yeah, that'll be fine. And I remember that the radio guy from St. Catharines, he came down and he asked, is there any chance that'll get changed? And I'm going, well, not really. I ruled it a hit in the first. I don't know. I'm planning to keep it a hit. So the game ends, and that is the only hit for the Jammers. So that I head downstairs, and I'm heading immediately out of the locker room for the Stompers, because I thought I'll sit and talk with the coach and the manager, no problem. Who stops me first? The Jammers manager. He wants it to be ruled an error. He says, hey, the guy pitched a great game, who's going to care, whatever. Well, then suddenly here comes the St. Catharines guys. Greg was there. Suddenly he's like drifting around us. We must have stood there for like 20 minutes. And the thing is, I'm saying it was a hit. It's obviously a hit. The fielder, he tried his best. I can't shaft the fielder, and I give him an error. And we went on, and that both the managers were very polite. It didn't get belligerent or anything. Then it dawned on me. I thought, usually when this happens, one guy wants it to be a hit, one guy doesn't. Somebody's going to be mad and somebody's going to be happy. I thought, both the managers want this to be a hit. I don't have a thing to lose to change this into an error. So I said, hey, what have I got to lose? Okay, I'll change it into an error, which I did. So that the next day, I was talking with the radio guy from the Stompers, and he brought up a very good point, which now I will never forget. He says, that ball was a hit, but not when it's the only hit.
Interesting. Well, I must commend Jim Riggs for writing the best piece of copy the next day ever. Under a byline where it talked about the previous night's activities, Jim Riggs had written it, and throughout he referred to the controversy regarding the only hit, and he refers to how the scorekeeper did this, the scorekeeper did that.
The handsome scorekeeper.
and finally got done, with the article. And at no point during that article, written by Jim Riggs, sports editor, did he refer to the fact that the scorekeeper was Jim Riggs, and it was terrific. best piece of writing I've ever seen. You were there the night of Candid Camera.
Yes, that was a night to remember. I was one of the few who'd known about it, just so that I could take the photos of it. And once you were there live, the thing looked like a total flop. I mean, it didn't appear funny at all. But that then, once it ended, I got up in the booth, and that Funt was up there running it back on tape. And you could see it was funny on tape. But that when it happened, the fans were up in arms. Doherty began to get really mad just because that the pitcher was, what's his name, Bob Baxter. He began to get all frustrated. And that Pat could see he was beginning to lose it. And I mean, Pat was all for to do this, but it was beginning to get to a point. He could see the guy was going to get affected. It was going to affect the game and everything. But still, the key thing about that was that Baxter couldn't throw a pitch. Mm-hmm. If he threw a pitch with Funt behind the plate as the umpire, we've got big-time problems with the league, because Funt is not supposed to be out there as the umpire. So the game would have started without a real umpire. And Baxter, about 12 times, well, the deal about the whole thing was the catcher, he gave him signs he didn't know, which they kept calling a conference at the mound, and that's what was delaying the game. And then Funt would go out as the ump and say, "What's the matter? You don't know your signs," and all this stuff. Well, finally, the Baxter just figured, no matter what sign he shows him, I'm just going to throw a pitch and get this thing rolling. Well, every time he'd start to do that, luckily Funt would jump out from behind the plate and stop him, because if he threw that ball, we could have had big-time problems with the league, and not only the league, it would have gone into the minor league association and all that.
Recently, I received a videotape from Bob Baxter, where he explained his role in it and how he was completely unnerved by this and had no idea. And it was an interesting interview because his wife interviewed him at my request, just to get this on record. And Bob indicated, when his wife asked, weren't you suspect about what was going on? And he said, what's interesting to him, and now that he reflects back, is just before the game started, and this was what, the 48th game of the season? I mean, it was well into the season.
It was in August.
And Dan Hargis, the catcher, had caught Bob several times. So it's not as if they had not known each other. So he reflected, while he was on the mound, the fact that Hargis had gone in just before the game had started into the locker room. He assumed that Dan was sick. And therefore, when Dan got out there and started giving these signals, which were indecipherable, that he was delusional. And he tells us on the videotape. It's terrific. He goes on and on. He said, I thought the guy was just out of... And I didn't want to tell the manager that Dan is delusional, or he'll snap out of it or something, because obviously he's clearly ill. He was throwing signs that absolutely bore no relationship to anything in his entire career. And Bob Baxter was a Harvard graduate, so
right.
He was a pretty cerebral guy. And to see these signs, which, again, had no relationship, he was very, very disconcerted. Anyways, it goes on. It's a funny story, and my hope is that as part of this 60th year celebration, that Bob Baxter, Dan Hargis, and Pat Doherty will all be here on August 1st.
Great.
That may or may not be a scoop, but it's... we're talking along those lines. It'd be kind of fun to talk about. You've been involved in other incidents in the gym of a humorous nature. Do you recall any that you want to share with us now?
Geez, now you put me on the spot. can recall one night a local fast food restaurant was going to have a bit where they had a person go out to third and stand there with food. And this was supposed to be between the innings, and, you know, they would have this little affair. Well, the Doherty, once again, was the manager. Well, the kid with the food, he didn't know when he was supposed to be out there, and he's like standing at third when an inning's supposed to start. And we're ready to play a game, and he's got fries and drinks, and he's standing on third base, and Pat Doherty's there, like, yelling up to the booth, like, who is this guy? Get him out of here. One of the best ones, though, was that the local cable, which isn't the cable now, so the local cable came to film the game the one night, and that Danny Lanetta, he set this up, and he was so proud. We're going to have the cable here to get some tape of the game. So that, once again, Pat Doherty's the manager. He's standing there in the box at third. I'm standing next to Doherty to shoot the photos. And the game's all ready to start. The pitcher, he's warming up, and we're ready to go. And suddenly the plate ump calls time. And he's pointing out towards second base. So we're like looking out there. Standing right behind second base is the cable cameraman on the field. So the this was the XFL before the XFL thought to have cameramen on the field. They were way ahead of their time. So the umpire's pointing at this cameraman. Cameraman has no idea what he's pointing at him for. Doherty's having a fit again, like, what is this idiot doing? So finally he figured out he's not supposed to be there. So the obvious thing would be to walk off the field. But instead of like coming straight across the field towards the bench, he walks all the way to center field and then walks around the warning track, which we all had to wait for this little parade of the guy with the camera on his shoulder, which he had to be turning redder and redder because I think he finally figured out he did something wrong. So I'm dying to find out what this guy thought he was doing, so that after I shot my photos for a couple innings, I got upstairs to the booth and I saw Dan Lanetta. I said, what was that all about? He said he's seen the games that are on the game of the week, all the TV games, and he sees that same shot right from behind the pitcher, and he was going to get it. But Dan had to explain that camera's behind center field up on a stand, not on the field.
I've never heard that one. You've seen a lot of players in the last 25 years come through Jamestown. And to your mind's eye, who are the top 2 or 3 players that you've seen?
Marquise Grissom. Mm-hmm. You could tell when that he was here, he was going to do it. One of the most impressive quick players, fast start, was John Vander Waal, which I got a chance to talk to John this March down at the new ballpark. He was here for like a couple of weeks, and he ripped this league to shreds. He was batting like .478, and he was only here a little while, and boom, out he went. Jeff Weaver, when he came here as the #1 pick of the Tigers, when he pitched that first game, I've seen a lot of players come in, and this guy's supposed to be good. We've got the Betterments now, and Delino DeShields and all that. But Weaver, this guy's the #1 draft pick. When he pitched that night, it was like men, or a man against boys. He was just so powerful. And, of course, Jeff was here for a couple of starts, and then he was gone.
You weren't here when Randy Johnson was here, were you?
Yep. He didn't pitch much that year. He was injured.
But was there a sense when he came here that he was, when the Expos signed him, that he was extraordinary? Or was just a big...
I think they knew it. He didn't get to pitch much for that year, but that I don't think anybody was concerned about it because he had an injury. But they knew they had a pretty good guy here. And the best thing about Randy Johnson, and I cannot find the negative, I had a photo of Randy Johnson, who I believe is 6'10", He played on the team here with Mel Houston, who was like 5'5", and I got a photo of them standing beside each other.
Wow.
And it looks like father and son, and I cannot find the negative to make more prints of that, but it's a classic.
Is Pat Doherty your favorite personality?
Oh yeah, Pat was fun, and QV Low. I got to call Q about a month ago, and he sounds exactly the same, that southern accent, and once again he said, I love my time up there, you say hi to all the people.
Oh, that's terrific. Well, Jim, you have not only said hi to a lot of people through your columns, but you've also encouraged an awful lot of folks to come to the ballpark, and you, like your predecessor Frank Hyde, have provided an awful lot of insight into professional baseball here in Jamestown, New York, and part of that fabric is why we can talk about celebrating 60 years here. So thank you for everything you provided to us.
Thank you.
And Rick, turn over you in the sense that this has been one extraordinary hour. I've learned some interesting things from Lyle Parkhurst and Russ Diethrick and Jim Riggs. This is not your typical biographical show where I did this and I did that. There's a lot of meat here today.
A lot of good stuff. And you know, the guy who coined the phrase Grissom Gardens is sitting right here, Jim Riggs. So whenever you hear me say that, I got to pay a little royalty over there to Jimmy. But I love the story he told last year when the Expos were in town and you won the championship in Pittsfield and you guys took the wrong turn off the Express.
Yes.
You were partying
from hell, yes.
You were partying for 2 hours.
I wasn't partying, but the players were partying. But yeah, that was the worst thing. We'd been on the road about for 40 minutes. And the beer was flowing, and the players are all on the mic, and they're giving little speeches, and I'm working on my computer, and my main thing is, when are we going to get home? Like 6 a.m. or whatever, let's get home. And we'd been driving around for 40 minutes, and I looked out the window, and here's a sign, Pittsfield, 10 miles. The bus driver, he got lost on the way out, and he was getting lost on the way back.
All right, Jim, thank you. Look forward to all your articles. It was a great pullout today in the paper today. Make sure you stop by and get your Post Journal. It's got all the pictures and information you need to know on the Jammers. Lyle, thank you very much, sir, for coming down and sharing some memories with us. We really appreciate that. It's good to see you, sir. Russ Diethrick, as always, he's the best. And, of course, Greg Peterson. Greg, you know, you do a lot. You do a lot, sir. And I watched your the show you had on this past week. It was very impressive. And Jamestown is lucky to have you because you do so much for this town. And thank you for coming out.
Well, thank you, Rick.
And we look forward to seeing you out there at the ballpark. And speaking of that, tomorrow night is opening night. The Brooklyn Cyclones are in town. And guess what? Every game of the Jammers is going to be on the radio this year, right here on the home of the Jammers, 1340 WKSN. And I almost forgot, Dave Wellens, our general manager, he has his own show, and it's every Saturday morning here at 11 o'clock for that as well. So we hope you can join us out at the ballpark all year long. 60 years of Diethrick Park starting tomorrow night. Brooklyn Cyclones, 7:05 start. Come on down and see us, folks. Well, that's going to do it. I'll talk to you tomorrow night. So for Greg, Lyle, Russ, and Mr. Diethrick, Jim and Russ. I'm mixing my names up there. I apologize, guys. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you at Diethrick Park. Good night, everybody.